All right, guys, this is Norvell Central coming back at you with a YouTube video. And at this time of the recording, I have about 1,940 subscribers. So please hit that subscribe button, click the like button, comment your thoughts on the videos after the video and everything. And I really appreciate everyone's love and support. But let's go ahead and get straight into it. I think Mike Norvell, not a lot of people talk about this, but Mike Norvell has built a solid foundation in terms of building this Florida State roster. I mean, you talk about in 2020, he went 3-6, had a rough season with a couple of top end talent, but the bottom of his roster was not the greatest in the world. It definitely needed some improvement. Then you turn around and had 2021, had the 0-4 start, turned around and have a 5-3 finish to end up 5-7. Not exactly where you wanted to be, especially with a Florida State fan base that has championship level expectations. You turn over to 2022, and this is a situation where Mike Norvell was coming into the season on quote unquote the hot seat. And you're looking at it and trying to figure out, even Mike Farrell was talking about the find me 6 wins basically. And Florida State fans kind of ate that up after the season, but he went 10-3. He had wins over LSU, over Miami, over Florida. I mean, he had close matchups against Clemson and NC State and Wake Forest, and did really well. I mean, it was an easier schedule in the back half of the schedule because those teams really didn't perform that well. Had a huge bowl win against Oklahoma, and you can say it's a 6-6 Oklahoma team, but at the end of the day, that team battled back and fought, and this Oklahoma team never gave up. So when you look at some of the rosters, vacancies, I guess you could say, throughout the season and everything, and how they kind of stack up going into next season, you look at Jordan Travis at quarterback. He is coming back for his last season, 24 touchdowns, over 3,000 passing yards, did a tremendous job this season in trying to build that. You have guys like Brock Glenn, A.J. Duffy, Tate Rodemaker as well. So you have talent at that position. Turnover on the rushing side of things, you got Trey Benson. He is a fantastic weapon. I talked about Trayshawn Ward in a previous video, but wish him nothing but the best. You got Lawrence Toafili, you got Rodney Hill, you got C.J. Campbell, you got Josiah Holmes. You got a lot of guys there, and even a Sam Singleton that can come in as a freshman and play pretty well in certain aspects. And then you got Johnny Wilson, Micah Pittman. It hurts losing Pokey. I get that because he is an experienced option. He had almost 500 yards this season on 4 touchdowns. LSU remembers him very, very well. But then you look at guys like Kentron Portier. What will he do in this kind of offense? You talk about Malik McClain. Hakeem Williams, a 5-star prospect. I mean, Vandrevius Jacobs. I mean, the list goes on in terms of wide receiver help. And I think Florida State's wide receiver room is really, really stacking up to be really dangerous. You look at the tight end room without Cam McDonald, but you bring in 2 solid transfers in Jaheim Bell and also Kyle Morlock. And then you turn around and have Marquise and Douglas, Jackson West. The list goes on with that. But just kind of looking at upgrading that tight end room, I think was very important to kind of get those offensive weapons all over the field. Then you look at the offensive line. I mean, you are losing Dylan Gibbons, Demetri Emmanuel, Jasmine Turntine. You got also Caden Lyles that's going to be out unless he gets a waiver. We'll see how that goes. But he lost pretty much 4 capable offensive linemen, but you are returning Bless Harris, Robert Scott, Maurice Smith. I mean, you got guys that are being successful, even a Julian Armella that I think could step in. You got 3 quality transfers in terms of that, and I think it could be very, very good. I mean, I think Florida State's really hitting the nail in the coffin at this point, and I think Florida State can really do it with a lot of different things on the offensive side of the ball. I think they are a talented team. Especially on offense. You look at the defense side of the ball. I mean, you don't really know what's happening with Jared Verse just yet, but you have Patrick Payton. And then you turn over on defensive tackle, even with Fabian Lovett coming back next season, which I think was massive. You got Braden Fisk. You also got Darrell Jackson. I think there's a lot of pieces there. Joshua Farmer, A.O.T. Afasi. I just think there's so many weapons at the defensive tackle spot that, man, it looks really, really good. And you haven't seen a defensive tackle depth for Florida State in quite some time. Odell's going to have fun with this defensive line group. So we'll definitely see linebacker group. I mean, you got Kalen DeLoach, Tatum Bethune. I mean, you got all of those guys. DJ Lundy back. I mean, there's a ton of weapons on the linebacker side of things. And then you're bringing in a guy like Blake Nicholson and DeMarco Ward. I think that's something that not a lot of people talk about. Cornerbacks, you got Ventrell Cypher. It's one of the best cornerback transfers that you've had in this transfer portal. I think that's a huge get for Florida State. You've had those young freshmen that are coming in as well. And then on the safety position, even though you are losing Jamie Robinson, which I think is a big loss there, you got Shyheim Brown that I talked about. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. And then you're looking at some of those other guys to kind of step up. Maybe Renato Green steps over to safety. I don't see it, but, you never know. Azaria Thomas, I think, is another guy that you can kind of lean to. And then you look at Ryan Fitzgerald. I think his confidence is getting better each and every week. And you kind of saw that. I mean, he had that rough 2-game stretch there where he missed a couple of field goals, and then he kind of factored it in strong. I mean, he may not have the greatest leg in the world because, I mean, he did miss a couple of 50-yarders and was kind of short on some of those. But I do think if his confidence gets better, I think you can kind of trust him within that 30 to 40 kind of range there. But, I really think that Mike Norvell can really get this season started off on a right track. I mean, you look at this schedule. I mean, he plays LSU in Orlando. He turns around and plays Southern Miss, North Alabama, and Florida as his non-conference games. Then you got Boston College, at Clemson, Miami, Syracuse, Wake Forest, Duke, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. I think Pitt's going to be a little bit harder because it is on the road. Duke is also going to be a tough team to play. And then, they're at Tallahassee, so it's not that bad. I'm not saying that Duke's some hostile environment. But then you got Wake Forest without Sam Hartman. You got Syracuse that may be losing out on Sean Tucker at this point. Miami that's still struggling, but you got them at home. Clemson on the road, which I think is probably going to be your number one roadblock there. At Boston College, they're not really that great of a team without Phil Jerkovich. And then at Florida is always going to be a tough place to play in a rivalry game versus LSU and Orlando. We'll see how they kind of factor up with all the scandals going on there. But just overall, I mean, when you're looking at that schedule, everybody talks about will it be a 9 or a 10-win season at least on the floor? And man, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, this team can be elevated up to an ACC championship level, but you have to crawl before you can walk at this point. I think Florida State fans really have to have that expectation in themselves to be successful. I get it. Florida State is a championship level and driven place that is known for championships. I mean, they have 25 10-win seasons in their program history, and they've only been playing football since 1947. So at this point, I mean, you really have to understand that Florida State through the last couple of years has not seen this level of success. They finally got it this past season. Will they turn into a Michigan State that kind of struggled after they had their 10-win season or 11-win season, and just kind of fell off the face of the earth at this point? Florida State's not Michigan State, but the point is you can't let this level of expectations of 10 wins go down the drain at this point. You have to continue to build and factor off of that. Mike Norvell's done a great job in building the foundation. He's done a couple of unpopular things in terms of keeping the staff and doing some other things as well. It's a culture that he is building at this point. Now, I'm not saying that he probably doesn't need to make some staff changes. There may be some staff changes. There may not be. But at the end of the day, I mean, Mike has done enough to build Florida State fans' trust. He talks about it in his press conference as well. You don't need to really build his trust. He wants you to really trust in him and let his foundation kind of work through it and trust him in terms of that. So it's just going to be a factor of it as it is. And he lets his play on the field kind of talk for himself. And I'm really glad that Mike Norvell has kind of found himself in terms of that. And it's just been something kind of great to watch in terms of being a Florida State fan at this point, because as we all saw, I mean, you talk about it in the offseason. Jordan Travis can't be able to throw a football. He can't stay healthy. Why are they getting Trey Benson? He's an injury-prone running back. I mean, you talk about the wide receiver group and Ron Dugans. Why is he still here at this point? I mean, you talk about the tight ends. Biscuit, Marquise Douglas really stepped up this season, even when Cam McDonald was still there, and you saw him be that second option. What happens with Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas not being back there? They got more sacks this past season than they did the previous season. So you look at it, and I mean, there's just a lot of great things that you can kind of point to. And I think Florida State fans are kind of lost into that because I think they've set themselves a new expectation at this point. It's completely understandable. You have expectations of the university, and Florida State is a championship-driven place. But you have to kind of falter back a little bit at this point. I think Florida State can reasonably win at least 8 games out of this, barring anything unnecessary. I think 10 wins is where I would mark it at right now, but I definitely couldn't doubt this team in terms of making a push in terms of that ACC championship contenders. But yeah, I definitely want to see how we kind of finish the roster out strong this upcoming season and this upcoming offseason. And definitely excited to where the future leads for Florida State, because Mike Norvell has done all of the great things that we could ask for so far through year 3 of his tenure. But I really appreciate all the love and the support so far on all of my videos. Be sure to catch out the other videos that I pinged throughout the video. And as always, go Noles.